This is the world's first motor car. It was unveiled in 1886 by creator Carl Friedrich Benz, who drove down the streets of Mannheim at a top speed of 16 kilometers per hour. Sure, this may sound underwhelming by today's standards, but we have to give it to Mr. Benz. His invention was only unveiled less than a decade after the world's first light bulb was introduced. This was roughly 30 years before ordinary people could make ice in their homes, back when men still had to visit the barber every time they wanted a shave. In 2024, of course, things have changed. Today, we have electric scooters that can easily outpace the Benz patent motor wagon in a drag race. We have 5-blade razors in our bathrooms, liquid nitrogen tanks that freeze food instantly, and LED lights that last well over a decade. How did we get from there to here in just over a century? The long answer can fill up pages of a science magazine. But the short answer, and the one most relevant to motorsport, is evolution. Over the years, we've seen it in action time and time again. The same force that turned ape-like primates into walking, talking, and social media influencers has driven us humans to redefine the ordinary, to create something even more spectacular when our backs are against the wall. It's the survival of the fittest mentality that makes automobile designers look at a perfectly functional car and ask, how can we improve? It's the same force that makes the world's top drivers get into vehicles capable of breaching 400 kilometers per hour and say, great, can it go faster? It's what took us from Ben's simple 3-wheel wagon to powerhouses like Ford GT40s, Porsche 917s, and Jaguar D-Types. In the last couple of decades, few manufacturers have fallen prey to this force more than Audi Sport. What else could explain how its team would stare down at some of its most dominant designs and think, to hell with this, let's start over? Through the early 2000s, Audi Sport remained virtually unchallenged on the Circuit de la Sarthe, achieving victories and mastering efficiency at a rate that knots higher than its closest competition. Finally, with no one left to take the fight to, it threw down the gauntlet to its own staff, encouraging them to create something truly extraordinary. The result is the Audi R18, a vehicle that shattered conventions, redefined efficiency, and left an indelible mark on the 24 hours of Le Mans. A vehicle so perfect, we wouldn't be surprised if Carl Benz smiled down from the heavens and declared, Sehr schön. To understand how we got to this stage of Audi's race car evolution, let's take a page out of Darwin's book and look to the past. It's the year 2000, and a family called the Kardashians have just released a TV show. All fashionable celebrities are now wearing Uggs, and a little rapper from Detroit is taking over MTV. On the racetrack, Audi has just wrapped up its first win at the 24 Hours of Le Mans after entering the World Endurance Championship a year prior. Its beast of choice is the R8, a Le Mans prototype developed in collaboration with Joest Racing. This car's fitted with a 3.6-liter V8, which officially produces 610 horsepower, but some estimates suggest that it might be as high as 670. No one's entirely sure, but what we do know for certain is that no one is arguing specs when they see this car on the track. They're standing on the sidelines, mouths firmly wide open. So it should come as no surprise that during the 2024 Hours of Le Mans, the Audi LMP 900S stormed its way into first, second, and third place in front of an audience of 20,000 dumbstruck motorsport fans and experts. From that point on, the UGG started on a steady decline, but Audi Sport, akin to Eminem and the Kardashians, stayed on the up. The team, helmed by a formidable Dr. Wolfgang Ulrich and supported by the rocket ship R8, racked up win after win at the Le Mans, taking the top step of the podium in 2001, 2002, 2004, and 2005. Now, after a series of victories this spectacular, one might expect Audi to sit back and rest on their laurels for a season or two. Surely the team must have been content knowing that they had what it takes to beat the best. But that's the thing about survivors, you rarely ever catch them sleeping. So in 2006, while other teams scratched their heads and figured out how to challenge Audi for the throne, the manufacturer was busy completing a side quest, a mission to unlock new levels of speed and reliability. Proving once again that innovation is the currency in motorsport, it created the audacious diesel-powered R10, the first of its kind at Le Mans, in the modern era at least. It didn't take too long for the R10 to prove a worthy successor to the dominant R8. The car's 5.5-liter engine produced 650 brake horsepower and a staggering 1,100 Newton-meters of torque, making it easily the most powerful diesel engine of its size. A hat trick of wins followed in 2006, 2007, and 2008. cementing the R10 experiment as more proof that survival of the fittest extends out on the track as well. But this isn't the story of that car. Neither is it the story of the R15, a successor with even better agility around the corners, and the winner of another Le Mans in 2010. Instead, it's a story about how Audi looked at this lineup of incredible prototypes and said, "Hold my beer, because there's a lot more where that's coming from." In the Autosport garages in 2006, it didn't take long for other teams to realize that Audi was sitting on something special. Clearly, diesel-powered engines were capable of a lot more than simply lugging 18-wheel haulers across the country. So, in 2007, Peugeot became the second major manufacturer to run a diesel-powered vehicle at Le Mans, the 908. Now, despite following in Audi's footsteps, this car was far from being a knockoff. In fact, it was fitted with a 5.5-liter engine that produced more than 700 horsepower and 1,200 newton-meters of torque, making it around 8% more powerful than the R10 that Audi was running at the time. By 2009, it was official. Audi's own innovation had come back to haunt it. That year, the Peugeot managed to nick a rare Le Mans victory off Audi, as part of a rampage that saw it dominate 19 out of the 28 races it started between 2007 and 2011. But if there's one thing we know about Audi, it's that the manufacturer doesn't believe in second best, especially not when it comes to achieving maximum efficiency. This is a German team we're talking about after all. So, even as it was in the process of being dethroned by a dominant Peugeot, Audi Sport began tinkering with its design. Spurred not by a new set of regulations and a new challenge to its top dog status, it took apart the R15 piece by piece. All that would remain was the tried and tested diesel concept. As Ulrich Barecki, the head of engine development at Audi Sport, confirmed at the time, the TDI continues to be the most efficient technology. For proof, he pointed to the high share of TDI units among Audi's production models. Once those questions were out of the way, there was another issue to deal with. Audi would also have to adapt to the ACO regulations for 2011, which called for a substantial reduction of engine power. This rule effectively ensured that all cars would run slower in 2011. But that wouldn't matter much to fans. One of the great things about Le Mans is that despite being called a race, it isn't just about getting from point A to point B as fast as possible. The infamous Circuit de la Sarthe runs 13.6 kilometers and has 33 turns. It requires cars to stay out for 24 solid hours and requires several pit stops along the way, once every 45 minutes, even without any obvious reliability issues. Cars have to be stable in the corners, blast down straights, and stay in one piece for extended periods while being pushed to their absolute limits. For the head of Audi Motorsport, Dr. Wolfgang Ulrich, the new regulations, coupled with the demands of the circuit, meant shifting focus to aerodynamic efficiency. Following a few computer simulations and wind tunnel tests, Audi decided for the first time since 1999 that it would create a closed coupe, a design that was trialed in the ill-fated R8R and failed to make much of an impact in Audi's first year at the WEC. The new prototype was also fitted with a new 6-speed gearbox with a high amount of carbon fiber composite material, bringing the weight down. A new chassis was also fashioned with a similar aim. Unlike other closed Le Mans prototypes, Audi opted for a carbon fiber monocoque that featured a single-component design. This reduced the weight further and increased the car's rigidity. To comply with the new engine regulations, Audi fitted the car with a 3.7-liter V6 TDI unit that produced 540 bhp, far less than the outgoing R15. But because of its size, the engine was also about 25% lighter than the V10 TDI in the R15. It was set at a cylinder angle of 120 degrees, which gave it an extremely low center of gravity, and was an innovation generations ahead of its time. While V8 engines were technically permitted under the new regulations, there's a reason why Audi opted against them. The team was thinking ahead of the competition and putting in measures for progressive electrification. But more on that later. The R18 was fitted with a single turbocharger that sat above the engine and drew air directly through the air scoop mounted on the roof. As Dr. Martin Mühlmeier, the head of technology at Audi Sport, said, this design allowed them to convert the dynamic pressure created at high speeds with minimal losses into power. Basically, Audi Sport managed to generate an insane amount of power from what was an extremely compact engine. As it turns out, this was just a glimpse of what the manufacturer's focus on ultra-lightweight technology would end up creating. Almost as if showing off at this point, Audi was also the first manufacturer to introduce LED headlights on the R18 TDI. a technology that's now become increasingly popular on production cars. This innovation used less electricity, gave the car higher lighting quality, and weighed less than halogen systems. As a result of all these innovations, the R18 TDI was possibly the quietest race car that Audi ever created, tearing down the racetrack with nothing but a whispering murmur. This, too, was an exercise in increasing efficiency. In the wise words of Wolfgang Ulrich, noise is unused energy. In May 2011, the car lined up at the Spa-Francorchamps circuit in Belgium for its first race of the season. The performance on this track didn't give much away, but the team already had enough test laps around the Le Mans circuit with the new R18 prototype to stay confident. It already knew what most fans were to discover soon after. On June 11th, the day after the Le Mans race, 249,500 spectators gathered to witness what would end up being one of Le Mans' closest finishes ever. The Audi R18 showed up in a carbon fiber livery, a visual representation of its lightweight technology. One of these cars, driven by Marcel Fessler, André Latour, and Benoit Trullier, started from pole after having set the fastest lap in the third qualifying session. But Audi was by no means running away with the lead. In the following 24 hours, P1 changed hands 46 times, with 4 cars vying for the top position. And then, heartbreak. Shortly after the race began, an Audi piloted by Alan McNish nicked a lapped car and went hurtling into the barriers. Later that night, Mike Rockenfeller, piloting another Audi, lost control of his vehicle and had one of the most dramatic crashes in Le Mans history. Fortunately and amazingly, neither were seriously injured. Back on the track, with Audis 1 and 3 out of the picture, all eyes were on the number 2, piloted by the trio of drivers who had put the car on pole. All through the race, Audi staved off stiff competition from a relentless Peugeot, but managed to stay ahead courtesy of its speed in the fast corners. During the final sector of the circuit, Audi was 0.8 of a second faster than Peugeot. Every time Peugeot threatened to cause an upset, a combination of Audi Sport's innovative V6 TDI engine, the decision to run full LED headlights, and various other lightweight technologies ended up keeping them in the lead. Eventually, in a nail-biting finish, the Audi drivers brought it home and finished ahead of the Peugeot with a margin of just a little under 14 seconds and an average speed of 201.266 kilometers an hour. That's 14 seconds over 4,800 kilometers. The narrow victory and the 2 devastating crashes prompted Wolfgang Ulrich to call the 2011 race one of the most difficult Audi has ever contested, but also one of its sweetest results. But just like that, Team Audi was back on top. It took just 1 year of being challenged by an upstart Peugeot for the team to hit back with a brand new, outlandish design. By this point, Audi had taken its 10th victory at Le Mans in just 11 years, and Benoit Trullier became only the 5th driver to win Le Mans from pole position. The manufacturer also achieved a rare Le Mans hat trick, picking up pole position, fastest race lap, and the victory. So naturally, in the face of such dominance, this would be the last innovation we'd see from Team Audi for a few years, right? Especially considering that in the previous decade they had created not just 1, but 4 dominant prototypes. You might be thinking this is the end, but this is Audi, remember? By 2012, as more automobile manufacturers began developing electric vehicles for the road, the ACO permitted hybrid prototypes to enter Le Mans for the first time. This effectively set up a showdown between 3 types of cars at the world's foremost endurance race: the diesel-electric versus petrol-electric versus the conventional diesel. Now Audi, with its perfectly functional and some would even say supreme vehicle, could have simply spared the investment and continued on its winning streak. But that's what sets Audi apart from the rest. While other manufacturers faced with this choice would look to win with a proven technique, Audi's shown time and time again that it has innovation firmly in its DNA. Sure, winning races was important, but for Audi, it was more crucial to evolve its race cars to improve their road-going versions. It's a legacy that dates back to the 1980s when Audi first unleashed its 4-wheel Quattro on an unsuspecting World Rally Championship Group B. Or in 2006, when it single-handedly proved that diesel-powered engines were not just capable of competing in endurance races, but were possibly even superior to their petrol counterparts. So, in 2010, it came as no surprise that Audi Sport had preempted the regulations and already begun creating a hybrid version of the R18, the R18 e-tron Quattro. The fact that Audi was thinking ahead of the competition is evident when you take a closer look at the R18's design. which, if you recall from earlier, was specifically created for progressive electrification. Essentially, while other manufacturers were busy playing checkers in the lead-up to the 2011 Le Mans, Audi was playing chess at the Grandmaster level, leaving the door open for some form of energy recovery and transfer system further down the line. This incredible foresight would eventually manifest into the R18 e-tron Quattro, the first Le Mans Prototype 1 car to combine a highly efficient TDI diesel engine with an efficient electrical motor. Here's how it works. The turbo diesel power in this new car is supplemented by a hybrid system, which regenerates brake energy into a flywheel that's then fed back into the front wheels under acceleration. Meanwhile, the V6 TDI from the R18 feeds 510 horsepower to the rear wheels. The car wasn't just fitted with an ordinary flywheel, but also an entirely new ultra-lightweight electric flywheel developed by Williams Hybrid Power. Its motor generator unit was supplied by fellow German company Bosch. To deal with all the additional weight brought about by the new system, Audi reduced weight in other areas, such as by fashioning a new gearbox out of carbon fiber. Now, this is, of course, an oversimplification of the feat that Audi had actually managed to pull off. Every component in this car was pushing the boundaries of motorsport engineering. In fact, Ulrich himself said that the e-tron Quattro was without a doubt the most complex racing car Audi Sport had developed in its 32-year history. To give you an idea of what he meant, the manufacturer had never developed a sports car with two driven axles, never worked on hybrid technology, and had no prior experience creating such sophisticated electronic networking systems. To accomplish all these firsts while ensuring that the car still adhered to Audi's ultra-lightweight commitment would take nothing short of a miracle. And yet, just 18 short months after work began, the e-tron Quattro completed its first test run. The car weighed only a fraction more than the R18, which also underwent similar weight reduction measures and was reintroduced as the R18 Ultra. At this point, it wouldn't be a surprise if Audi was short for audacious all along. As the 80th Le Mans rolled around on June 16th and 17th, 2012, Audi was itching to show the world what it was capable of. It entered 4 cars into the race, 2 hybrid e-tron Quattros, and 2 R18 Ultras. The driver lineup, meanwhile, boasted of an impressive 22 victories between them up until that point. To make the build-up even sweeter, the drivers who'd won the previous edition, Marcel Fessler, André Latour, and Benoit Trullier, had set another blistering qualifying lap and would start the race on pole. The 3 other cars would start 2nd, 4th, and 6th. As you'd imagine, the mood at the Audi garage was upbeat. But, as Wolfgang Ulrich once said, "You should never rejoice too early at Le Mans." I know what you're thinking, he's like the German Socrates. If there's one thing we could say for certain about the infamous Le Mans, it's that starting first rarely ever guarantees a win. In fact, up until that point, only 7 cars had started and finished the race first since qualifying was first introduced in 1963. The Le Mans is never without a fair share of incidents that shake up the standings. To further complicate matters, Audi didn't have the only hybrid vehicle at Le Mans that year. Toyota, another manufacturer not known for resting on its laurels, had pulled off an incredible feat and built the TS030 as the first petrol hybrid car to race at the WEC. At the start line, the 2 Toyotas would also split the Audis, qualifying 3rd and 5th. They were almost guaranteed to be breathing down the R18s for the next 24 hours. As you might have guessed, this was going to be one of the most intense races Audi Sport has ever taken part in. During the race, the number 4 car, driven by Marco Bonanami, had to stop on the circuit twice with a transmission fault, and the race-leading number 1 Audi, driven by Trullier, spun at the entry to the pit lane, losing position to Audi's number 2 car. Then, on Sunday, Marc Jean slid off in the number 3 car, bending the right front suspension, and with just 3 hours to go, Alan McNish had an accident in the number 2 car. Thanks to all these incidents, there was a brief period where one of the Toyotas was in the lead. Fortunately for Audi, its rival ended up having an even more disastrous race. On the 82nd lap, one of the Toyotas collided with a Ferrari at the Mulsanne corner before somersaulting into the air and crashing into a tire barrier. Its driver cracked 2 vertebrae and was rushed to the hospital. Then, 10.5 hours into the race, the second Toyota retired after an engine failure. Suddenly, the tables had turned back in Audi's favor. Despite several heart-and-mouth incidents, all cars were quickly fixed and sent back on track. Eventually, it was only in the final 2 hours that the Audi garage could finally let out a sigh of relief. Its 2 R18 e-tron Quattros had somehow managed to make their way back to first and second positions. Against all odds, an R18 Ultra followed close behind in third, while the second would cruise to the finish line in fifth. So, as the 24 hours drew to a close, 240,000 spectators watched Audi monopolize the podium with a 1-2-3 finish for the fifth time. If that doesn't sound impressive enough to you, you should know that a manufacturer's pulled off such a feat only 14 times in the entire history of the 24 hours of Le Mans. But that's not all. Audi had also pulled off its second consecutive hat trick at the race after qualifying first, finishing first, and earning the fastest lap. The winners even completed a larger race distance than the previous year, touching 5,151 kilometers with an average speed of 214.468 kilometers an hour. By the end of the 2012 race, Audi had truly cemented itself as the undisputed champions of Le Mans, winning a staggering 11 times in 13 years. In the following years, the R18 e-tron Quattro went through further modifications and won the 2013 and 2014 races as well, making Audi the only manufacturer to win 4 Le Mans on the trot. After 2016, Audi withdrew from Le Mans, but not without leaving its mark. The team had the second most Le Mans victories after its sister team, Porsche. However, since it had achieved 11 victories in 14 starts, compared to Porsche's 16 wins in 62 races, it bowed out of the WEC with the highest win rate of any manufacturer in history. With that said, for Audi, showing up at Le Mans wasn't just about filling up the trophy room. Right from the outset, the manufacturer shown its intent to use the race as a platform to display the limits of what it can achieve, to prove that innovation doesn't and shouldn't stop in the pursuit of victory. Between 1999 and 2012, fans had the opportunity to watch Audi crush the Le Mans competition with 4 different cars, each of which won on its debut run. Honestly, it's the kind of script a production house would reject for being too unrealistic. But leaving aside all the statistics, fans were also lucky enough to watch Audi go from creating the first major diesel-powered car to a compact engine with overwhelming performance to an all-wheel hybrid that was faster than its predecessor while reducing fuel consumption, and a successor with laser headlights that take instructions from satellites. In just over a decade, Audi allowed us to witness the evolution of motorsport in real time. Now, as all eyes turn to Audi's much-anticipated entry into Formula 1, this Le Mans run has left little doubt that it won't nail the regulations. Audi is a team of champions after all.